everyone, I'm Kimberly Jolly from Fat Quarter Shop FlossTube, and today I'm going to show you how to use our Santa baby pattern to make this wonderful letters to Santa holder so your kids can write their letters to Santa. And if you would like to sew this, just watch our tutorial and subscribe to our channel. And if you want to finish this with non-quilting, you can finish it this way, which was finished by Priscilla Blaine, and you can find instructions on how to do that with her Priscilla's Plaids on priscillas2000.blogspot.com. So join me today to make this. So you obviously need the Santa baby pattern, and all of the supplies that you need are on the back and on our website. We stitched on minty green opalescent 14 count Aida, and we're going to be using soft and stable to make it very firm and where it will stand up. You just need a couple of basic supplies. The trim that we're going to be using is the Cloud Small Vintage Trim, and we're going to be using 3 different fabrics. These are all Riley Blake basics that are linked in the video. And if you would like to make this and you're not a member of our Stitch Quarterly Club, this will become available for sale in January 2021. So come join me and we'll make a cute little project today. The first step in making the Santa's letters is to cut your cross stitch piece to 7.5 inches square. And I find it's easiest when you're working with cross stitch to use a square ruler. If you don't use a square ruler, I would recommend using a larger ruler and using a friction pin to mark before you cut, just so there's no mistakes. But because it's cross stitch, I'm going to use a square ruler. And when I put this ruler down on my design, my goal is to have an even amount all the way across. So when I'm looking at this, it looks to me like I've got about 1/2 inch here, 1/2 inch here, and 1/2 inch here, and kind of a 1/2 inch at the top. So I'm just going to make sure that it looks pretty good. It doesn't have to be exact, but it looks to me pretty good because we're at 1/2 inch all the way around. So that is great. Now I'm going to just cut around all 4 sides. Now here I'm just going to rotate slowly. And luckily my ruler did not move because it is Aida. It's a thicker cloth, and so with the Creative Grids grips, it's going to stay in place. And just cut the other 2. And I would just set this aside. And I would probably get rid of this, but I would maybe keep a little piece, write the name of the fabric, and put it away in your stash so that if you ever need something that's colored, you can color match it to your floss. And now we will start working with our cotton fabrics. We picked a white fabric for our front and back. We picked a check fabric for our pocket, and we picked a polka dot for our binding. And now we'll cut our pieces. From your front and back fabric, you'll cut 2 1 3/4 by 7.5 inch rectangles, 1 1 3/4 by 10 inch rectangle, 1 6.5 by 10 inch rectangle. These are to piece the front. For your backing, you will cut 1 13 by 18 inch rectangle. For the pocket on the front, you will cut 1 10 inch square. For binding, we're using 2 2 inch by width of fabric strips. Soft and Stable is a really nice product by Annie's. It's very firm, and it is going to keep your project really nice and firm, and I think this is a much better option than using batting. If you use batting, you'll want to use something pretty thick, but we're using Soft and Stable, and we're cutting this 13 by 18, which is the same size as your backing fabric. To piece the top, you will take your stitched piece and to the left and right add the 1 3/4 by 7.5 inch strips. Once that's done, you will add a 1 3/4 by 10 inch rectangle to the top, then add the 6 1/4 by 10 inch rectangle to the bottom. When you're stitching, use a 1/4 inch seam, and I'm going to be using 100% cotton thread, and I'm going to use Aurifil color 2024 since it really matches my background fabric. When you're pressing, you want to press towards your background piece away from your Aida cloth. Now we're going to complete the top. What we're going to do is take the backing fabric that we cut previously, put it on your table right side down, nice and flat. Add your soft and stable, nice and flat. You can iron this, so if there's a crease, I would iron it out, and then just put this kind of on the center. I'm going to do a little bit of quilting on this. I am going to kind of just decide right now what I'm going to do. But I think I'm going to do, I'll probably start by doing stitch in the ditch around here. So I'm going to go ahead and draw lines 1/4 inch away from that seam. I don't think I'm going to do that down, so I'm going to erase that. And a friction pin will disappear with heat later. I do like to draw my lines with the soft and stable below it. So I'm going to kind of stitch right here, and I'm going to do one more 1 inch away. That way we have a little bit of lines on the top and the bottom. You don't have to quilt too much. You can quilt as little or as much as you would like. Just want a little bit of quilting there. I think I'm going to actually add a little bit in between too. And if I change my mind, I can change my mind. Let's see. So I'm just going to draw some lines, then I'll decide what I'm going to actually quilt. But I think this needs a little bit of detail to it. And down here, the pocket is going to cover this part up. So I'm just going to draw some lines that are further apart because you're not going to see them as much. So the lines that I've drawn right here is I'm going to stitch 1/4 inch away, 1/2 inch away, 3/4 inch away, and then 1 inch away. And then down here I'm going to do a few lines that are 1/2 inch apart and then 1 inch apart at the bottom. I have less lines at the bottom since this will be fully covered with a pocket. Once this is all together and I have all my lines, I'm going to put a few pins around the edge, making sure to get the front and all the way to the back in place. Once I have it pinned, I'm going to flip it over and just make sure that it is nice and flat. I'm going to use a walking foot. A walking foot is going to guide the top and the bottom feeders together to really keep it nice and flat. I'm going to use RFL color 2024, and I'm just going to stitch directly on the lines, and I'm probably going to use a 3.0 stitch length. So I finished my quilting. This is how the front looks and the back. And the way that I did my stitching, I did as much as I could without having to start and stop. So I started in one corner, and when I started, I did do a back stitch to secure it. I went all the way around, then went to the next seam, all the way around, jumped over to the next seam, all the way around, and so on. And I did that. And then I came down and just started stitching these all the way across. Now these black lines, I'm going to iron off real quick, and then we're going to trim it down. So to square this up, I'm just going to cut right on the very edge. And I did do some quilting right on the edge so that this wouldn't pop up. And when I cut the bottom, I'm going to line up a perpendicular line here with the edge and just trim, and that's going to get it nice and square. I'm going to do that on all four sides. It doesn't have to be an exact size, but by doing it one side at a time, all four of your corners are going to be at a 90-degree angle. And that is the front, and now we're going to move to adding the pocket and the binding. So what I like to do is take my 10-inch square, fold it in half, put the raw edges right there at the very bottom, and go ahead and clip this on. And we're going to take the sewing machine and baste all the way around the outside about 1/8 of an inch away, and you just want to make sure that right here, this is the fold so you can put your Santa cards in. To put the binding around the edge to finish it off, we've got 2 strips that we have cut 2 inches by width of fabric. We're going to join those together. And when I'm doing binding, I like to join those on the diagonal. But to start, on one of the strips, I'm going to cut a straight edge on just one of the strips. Then I will take the strip with the straight edge, put it on the top of the other one, and I'm going to leave all of this here. I'm going to then put in pins, and I'm just going to put in a couple of pins so it doesn't move. And I find I get more accurate results when I do this. Then I'm going to draw a line from top left to bottom right. We're going to go to the sewing machine, stitch directly on that line, and you just want to make sure your line is going this direction and not the other direction. The reason I leave all of this hanging off is because when I'm sewing, I can make sure I get right to this point. And if I had cut it right on the edge, sometimes your fabric will move and then you won't get a really nice diagonal. I cut a straight edge on the first strip so that I could align that at the very top of the second strip. Now that we've sewed that, you can see that when you fold it open, you get a really nice straight all the way across. So now I'm going to cut the back. I'm going to just cut up a little bit to get this off. And I'm going to cut about 1/4 inch away from my stitch line. Then I'm going to press my seam flat, press it to one side, and then I'm going to press it open. The reason I press this open is because if you don't, you will have more bulk on one side than the other. So I will press this open. And then we're going to take the entire strip and put wrong sides together. Keep it as lined up as you can there. And press the entire strip all the way across, and then I will show you how to attach the binding to the front. So now we're going to add the binding all the way around, and I'm going to step you through how to do that. You're going to take the raw edge when you open it up and put that at the bottom. I like to start kind of on the bottom or on the side of your project. I'm going to leave we call it a tail, and I'm just going to start. I am going to still use my walking foot, and I'm going to show you how to attach the binding on the front with my sewing machine. And when I start stitching, I'm going to stitch about right here and just leave this tail, and we'll use this to join the tail at the end. I'm going to start here. I'm going to stitch a 1/4 inch away from the edge, and I'm just going to use the line on my sewing machine plate. I'm going to take a few stitches. I'm going to have a 2.0 stitch length. I'm going to reverse to secure the stitches. And then I'm going to stitch until I get a 1/4 inch away from the edge. Now when I get close to the edge, I'm going to take a ruler and mark a 1/4 inch away. Stitch directly to that line. Pivot. You want to make sure you at least either backstitch or pivot off instead of just cutting your thread. So I'm going to fold this back, and when you fold this back, you want a straight line right here. If it's not straight, your binding corner will not be straight. So you just keep it there, finger press, pull it back, put a pin or two, start at the very edge and sew. You're going to do all 4 corners just like that. So I've left about a 4-inch gap right here. You can leave more if you would like. I'm going to go ahead and pull the left tail to about the center, so about 2 inches in, and I'm going to trim this off. And so I'm just going to use my ruler and trim. Then I'm going to take my right tail and I'm going to trim it 2 inches to the left of this one. So we cut our binding strips 2 inches wide. That's why we're going 2 inches past. So I will just put my tail where I can see a little bit of the left tail right here. You can kind of see that. And I'm going to mark 2 inches away. So this is 2 inches away, and I'm going to pull this off. I'm going to put my ruler on that 2 inches, which is right there. You can see the line. And I'm going to cut a little bit shorter of that. So I'm going to move my ruler about 1/8 of an inch to the right and cut. So I've got a little bit less than 2 inches right here. Now if you cut your binding 2.5 inches, you would do 2.5 inches instead of 2. Now we're going to join the tails. So now you have your tails. I went ahead and unstitched about 1 inch here just so I would have a little bit more room here. I'm going to take this, fold it in half, put a little binding clip there so that I have less bulk and I have a little bit more room to work. So your right hand is going to stay the same. Your left hand, the left strip will turn to the right, which is clockwise. And you will put a pin here. I have to use pins because when I get to the sewing machine, it kind of gets a little wobbly. So put a couple of pins. I'll turn it this way. You still want this out of the way. We're going to draw a line. It's kind of hard, but you've got a lot of bulk going on right here. But what you want to do is draw a line from the top left to the bottom right, just like you did before. And it kind of takes a little bit of finagling here. Go to the sewing machine, change your stitch length to about a 2.0, and you're going to stitch directly on that line, trying to keep it, just trying to keep this bulk out of the way and trying to keep it flat. And just sew straight on that line. So I've stitched on the line. Before I trim this off, I always kind of look, make sure it's going to lie nice and flat. Then I will take this, I just want to cut a 1/4 inch away from the seam, and now we're going to press. Now I'm going to just press this seam open and get it nice and flat on the back. So you can see that. I'm going to go to my sewing machine with my walking foot, and you can see that my previous start and stops are right here. I'm going to actually start about 1 inch before, stitch all the way down, and stitch 1 inch past my previous stitches. Now I like to just press flat all the way around my binding. And then I'm going to press my binding out away from my piece. This step is totally optional. I like to do this because it makes the hand binding on the back go a lot faster and flatter and just takes me less time. Before we hand sew the binding to the back, I'm going to go ahead and add some vintage trim in Cloud in the small size. It's Lori Holt's version of Rick Rack, and we're going to put that on the back before we do the hand binding. So I'm going to turn this over, and I'm going to go ahead and put this on one side, and I'm going to be putting that in the seam. So I'm going to just tack that down real quick on my sewing machine right on the edge. So I stitched that down, leave a little gap at the top. I am using a 14-inch piece. You can do it longer or shorter or that size. I'm just going to make sure my Rick Rack stays nice and flat so it's not twisted. Go all the way to the other side and stitch that down. That's how it looks on the front. And on the back, when we fold the binding in, it's going to be hidden. Now what I will do is take my Wonder Clips, clip them all the way around. Then we're going to hand stitch on the back. I like to use a red thread so it matches my binding and you're less likely to see your stitches. When I get to the rickrack, I'm just going to do it the same as I have been doing. Just fold it over and just fold it right on top of that rickrack. And then when you get to the other side, you'll fold right on top of that again. Then it's going to come, when we stitch it down, you'll see how it will still hold, but you just won't see it stitched in there. So right now you just kind of have to pin it, but when we stitch it, you'll see what happens. It's kind of, you just have to finagle it a little bit. If you don't want to hide it in the binding, you can always just do it after you put the binding on. So here on this rickrack, you just kind of fold it over, and I'll show you how to hide that inside of it. So now I'm going to show you how you hand stitch your binding down. I'm going to start on the corner that the rickrack is on. Where you cut your thread is where you knot. So you put a little knot. I like to use Clover black gold needles for binding. The reason I use these is they're really thick, and I like to have a thick needle when I'm doing binding so that it will go through nicely, and I use any of them. It doesn't matter to me which size, but that is the brand that I use. Just thread your needle. So to start, what I like to do is I'll take some wonder clips off. You can see the seam right here is where you put the binding on the front. So right here, if you go to the other side, that is your seam where your binding is attached. So I will take this needle, put it through the soft and stable through the back to start. That is going to hide the knot right there. And I will put a wonder clip back on, and I try to keep my binding right on the edge of this seam so that it's 100% the same size on the front as it is on the back. So as I'm stitching, I keep my eye and I pull this through the red, and I'm just going to stitch, and I'm going to put my stitches right on that binding stitch line, and then I know that it's the same on the front and the back. And I'm just going to stitch all the way till I get to about 1/4 inch away. Okay, and I'm just doing a whip stitch. It's just a long straight stitch, maybe about 1/8 of an inch away or 1/8 of an inch apart. And I'm going through the back, but I'm trying to make sure my thread does not come to the front. I'm going to stitch until you get to where you pivoted. And I just kind of hide my binding in here on this side. So I'm just hiding my rickrack in there on this side. When I get to this corner, this is where you pivoted. Put in about 2 or 3 stitches to secure it before you go to the next side. Then we will turn, put the rickrack down, now you have a lot of bulk right here, so it looks like I might need to cut a tiny bit of bulk off. So on the top, I might cut just a tiny bit off, just a tiny bit. Put the wonder clip on that line. And I know it's hard to see because it's white on white, but I've just got the rickrack going down. There's a lot of bulk here, but I just want my rickrack to be hidden, so I'm just pushing my rickrack down. And I'm just gonna try to miter this. Maybe I'll put this rickrack and just kind of pin it so it's out of my way, so it's not moving a lot. and you just kind of use your force and finagle it. You just create the miter right there. It's hard to see because the rickrack is kind of on top of it, but it's going to just peek out. You'll just kind of move the bottom down, kind of force it with the needle down, and you're just going to start stitching back in that same and you just stitch right on top of that rickrack. Just put your needle back through the rickrack, back down. So now you can see that with that stitch, I've got a miter on the front and a miter on the back, and I've got a little crease here, but when I'm done, I can iron that out. It will iron right out. And you're just gonna keep stitching, and your rickrack will just be facing down. And I will show you when you're done, it will still hang just like normal. So you just keep stitching all the way around, and when you get to the very end, just do maybe 5 stitches over your previous stitches, and all your binding will be nice and flat. Now you have a letters to Santa where you can either put your Christmas cards or your kids can write their letters to Santa. I love that we have mixed cross stitch with sewing. We hope you love this project, and I'll see you next time.